Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fireside Creators. I am Reverend Dr. Sherry Pallas. If you are joining us on Twitter, I'm sorry, Twitter's on the brain today, on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe. If you are on Facebook, register with StreamYard so we can see your name when you comment or have any types of questions. Please keep all comments and questions related to the show topic. And remember, this is a safe space. I want to give a shout out to my sponsors. Thank you so much, Ruth, Amanda, Michelle, and Kirsten. You ladies rock. I also want to say if you enjoy this show and would like to support it, you can go to sherrypallas.com and go to the support tab or just scroll down. It's there everywhere. It's backed by Stripe and PayPal. And for just the cost of a cup of coffee, you can support me in the show, and I'd really appreciate it. But I appreciate you watching, and that in itself is support. Okay, enough of the housekeeping. Tonight's show is on hell. And it's kind of been hell to get this show on. So let's go and introduce the panel. Our first guest is Dr. David DeAndre. He earned a bachelor's degree in theology and music from Philadelphia College of Bible, and master's from Temple University, and a doctorate from Yale University in musicology. He taught courses in the arts, humanities, and theology at an academic institution in Europe and North America. Although David was raised by a Baptist minister, was a minister of music, and a full-time missionary, he spent much of the last 3 decades deconstructing his Christian faith. He is currently writing a book on the detrimental aspects of Calvinism, on one's emotional health and relationships. Welcome, David.
It's very nice to join you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you.
Our next panel guest is Miss Anna Garcia Lucas. She is kind of my co-host at this point. She was born and raised in New Mexico. She's a mother, a veteran, and a wife and a survivor. Anna earned her MDiv at Episcopal Divinity School in Bexley Seabury. She is currently pursuing a master's in pastoral counseling, and I was sitting here today going, chaplaincy? I don't think I know how to pronounce that word correctly. Anyway, at Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary. She's Reformed Roman Catholic, a spiritual mystic, probably a heretic, and a lover of coffee, music, green chili, and good jokes. Welcome, Anna. How are you, love?
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. And our other panel guest is David Keith Greenaway. If you have been following the show, you are familiar with him. And if you've made it into the VIP, you personally know him because you've spoken with him. But David is from the UK and went to school in North Wales where he studied architecture. David is a blogger and author of an upcoming book. The first chapter is A Philosopher's Dream. His website is aliengg7.co.uk. Hello, David. How are you?
Hello, Dr. Sherry. Good evening.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for receiving me.
We've got some comments, but I want to go ahead and get started. So we are talking about hell, and I basically want to get everybody's beliefs on hell. A little bit of historical background. Zoroastrianism is actually the religion that came up with hell. They are the first dualistic religion that reached across the different boundaries. Judaism as well as some Buddhism was formatted after Zoroastrianism. It was also part of the Egyptian religions because that's where you would go into the lake of fire. Judaism does not believe in a hell as a place to go for eternity. That is pretty much exclusive to Christianity and Islam. And I think that most of what we know about hell and the horrible things come from Dante rather than the Bible, and a lot of misinterpretations of when Jesus was talking about Gehenna and Sheol and all of those types of things. And they've been used to control the masses, scare the shit out of them, terrify children, traumatize them, and all of the above. So let's start. David, DeAndre, what's your take on hell?
Okay, well, when I first started seriously deconstructing everything back in the 1980s, my first epiphany was about hell. And it suddenly dawned on me that for the torture and the punishment of hell to work, you would need a body. And I just don't think I'm taking this body anywhere after it dies. And it was sort of like realizing that Santa Claus doesn't exist. It just eliminated hell for me at that very moment. And I stopped worrying about it. And it was around that time also I stopped believing in Satan, and he hasn't bothered me since either. So, that was one of the first big epiphanies I had in my deconstruction process. And I haven't looked back from that moment ever since, even though you do have still a lot of people in the world who still believe in a literal place that we call hell. But recent research is showing that more and more people are dropping their belief in a literal place called hell. And that there's implications for that too, for traditional Christianity, but we can maybe get into that later in the show.
Well, and this place of hell, like you said, it requires a body. It requires a vindictive God, because you can't have an unconditional, forgiving God and a hell. Those two are mutually exclusive.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I've always struggled with, was how can love be unconditional and be burning in hell for eternity?
Could I comment to that?
Of course.
Okay. Well, everyone likes to point to 1 Corinthians chapter 13 as a description of God's love. But in fact, Paul never mentions God. He's just describing unconditional love. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Paul's God and the God of the Bible never does show unconditional love.
Yeah.
There's always a condition attached. In the Hebrew scriptures, it's circumcision and following the law. And in the Christian canon, the New Testament, you have to believe in his son, that he died for you and all that. There's always some condition. And even verses that Christians like to quote in Romans, that all things work out together for the good of those who God loves, or who love God, but who God called according to his purpose, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's the God of the Bible never shows unconditional love. So when Christians say God is love, and they're quoting 1 John chapter 4, they don't realize that if God is the very quality of love, God cannot do anything unloving, or God ceases to be the very quality of love.
Exactly.
It just doesn't match. And that's, like you say, hell doesn't work in that. And also, hell also requires a God who is separate from God's creation. So there's a new paradigm emerging in which God is being viewed more like source, the source of being, the source of life. And that source is connected to everything. The old paradigm is a separation paradigm in which God is separate, like we see on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo's portrait of David, right? And I mean, Adam and Eve. Well, Eve is still in Adam's arms because she's not created yet. But Adam is already created. And if you look at their fingers, they're not touching. And that's a very precise rendition by Michelangelo of the separation paradigm, that now Adam is separate from his creator. And that is something that hell requires also, that you can go to a place and be totally separate from the creator.
Well, and was the Jewish belief, right? Was a separation from God. That's what hell was. Or as Michelle Saveco said today, a disconnect. a disconnect from God, not a separation, because you can't necessarily be separated from something that is in its entirety. I personally believe that God is an energy, the energy of love, because beings are matter, right? Everything's either energy or matter, and all matter dissolves, disintegrates, dies, whatever you want to call it. So if there was truly a God or a Satan, these things would be long gone. And it's always something outside of yourself as opposed to owning the situation. So the devil made me do it, right? The easiest scapegoat, God and the devil are the biggest scapegoats on the planet for everything, for absolutely everything.
Yeah.
David Greenway, what do you have to say?
Fundamentally, I think the belief in hell, or the creation of hell in the said rites of creation, it was done with the advent of free will. Because basically, as you pointed out to me the other day, the two wolves in the parable about being good or being bad, if people willfully chose to be bad after they'd received free will, then they were punished. That's the way I understand it, because in the times past, intellectual understanding as we have it now, we didn't quite, the words then meant more, but weren't quite so descriptive.
Well, my thesis was on the belief in reincarnation. And I was really surprised that reincarnation includes some form of hell that is a karmic hell. And it was broken down into, like, if you lied, you were always chewing on glass. If you hurt someone, your fingers were being ripped. I mean, all of these really gruesome things, but it was not eternal. It was you go there, serve your time, basically your karmic debt, and then you move on to the next life, which I thought was, wow, that's kind of a double whammy. Christianity puts you in for eternity, but these go, okay, here's your hell, and then you got to reincarnate into something else that kind of might be hell too, which I thought was really interesting. Anna, what do you have to say?
Oh, so much. So, things that first, I grew up with hell. Hell was the place that was held over you for absolutely everything. It didn't matter what you did, you were going to hell. The first time, I think I was 7 years old, my mom got super angry with me and she told me, I hope you go to hell. And that devastated me. That absolutely scared me, because moms are super powerful.
Yeah.
Later, as I grew up and went to war and went through divorce and went through violence, my definition of hell changed. I could not pair up a loving God with hell, like David DeAndre said. It never made sense. So when I got to seminary and started really digging into stuff and like you said, deconstructing, which was honestly just clearing out. It's like cleaning a cat litter box, right? You get rid of the clumps and you have something that's anyway. For me, there is no physical place of hell. There is no physical anything. I don't believe in Satan, really. And Job kind of put me in that, the book of Job, the whole, why are these guys palling away and torturing this poor guy? So why even do good if they do this to this guy?
Yeah.
Holy cow. For me, and what I came into was that God is love, like you said, an energy, a matter, a verb, everything that has to do with love. And we are manifested from love over and over and over. The further we separate ourselves from love, whether we get angry at somebody, whether we hurt somebody, whether we do violence toward another, we walk away from love. We walk away from God. And thus we put onto ourselves hell. That is our making. That is what we do. We separate and isolate ourselves from the very community that we were made to be a part of. I was thinking about what you were saying, David Andre, about Michelangelo's depiction of the human finger and God. And the first thing I thought of was a two-way mirror. Whereas the person on the other side, God, is somebody that we may not be able to see, but is always able to see us. And if we put our finger to the mirror, it doesn't touch on a two-way mirror, does it? And there's an illusion of separation, but it's not there. And on the other side, God may be putting the finger, that sounds bad, putting the finger on our finger. God may be physically touching us. God is reaching out to us. Only something keeps us from seeing God. But there is that there. The further you get away from the
let me stop you there because I have a question for you.
Yes. Go ahead.
What do you mean by seeing God? So do you believe in this physical matter of a being, of some God in the sky per se?
Both and, because using that picture of a two-way mirror, what do you see when you look at it?
Oh, I like that. I like that.
You see yourself. And isn't that what we're told? We are created in the image of God. And if there were two or three people looking with you at that two-way mirror, you see them too. So do I believe God is a physical being? I believe God is what we need God to be, whether love manifests itself tangibly or physically or something we can touch, feel, smell. God is what we need God to be. Love is what we need love to be. Hell is what we create for ourselves through our negligence of ourselves and of other people. I think about most recently what's been on my mind, Afghanistan. That was hell.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the communities that I had with the people there were not hell. So the closer you get to being in community, in a good and effective and positive helping community, the further away you get from hell. It is on earth as it is in heaven, which is love. To me, that's how I look at it.
Well, and I think that a life without love, being loved, is hell. I mean, it's I reject all religion that takes the onus off of us.
Yes.
I believe the onus is on us, literally. So if we are going to invite God into the situation, it is because we are doing the acts. It is a verb. So if that's the case, then we are continually creating our reality and we are creating this hell. Or in a loving situation, our heaven on earth. I mean, I remember being in Costa Rica a couple years ago, and we were tubing down the river and stopping at all of these waterfalls. And my breath was taken away. It was like, this is my heaven. This is what I picture heaven to be, the purity, the beauty, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Being in a situation without love, being rejected, being abandoned, that's hell. That's really hell. And if we impose that on anybody else, again, taking the Satan out, taking the God out, and saying it is up to us to honor these people or to make their lives better or to issue in love, then it takes the blame off too. And, blaming everybody else is, for what you have done is, I think, a huge problem with what we go through. Real quick, let me give a shout out to Heather and Jeannie George and Tim for saying hello. I don't know who the Facebook user is, but we've got some energy in the comments tonight. So I think that one of my big problems with religion is that hell is used to control. And when I
Yes.
discovered that Buddhism doesn't believe in an eternal conscious soul, that wrecked me, because it was like, wait a minute, my whole life has been about heaven or hell. My entire life, and to not think that I didn't have a soul that carried on in some way, how would I even handle life? How does that even transpire into everything I know? And that is truly the lack of attachment, which is what they teach. It's also the lack of judgment, because us saying you're going to go to hell has given mass crowd control forever. One of the Davids, speak up.
Well, hell being a state of mind, and the opposite of love is a sense of separation. See, love is joining. Love is an extension of yourself, extension of being. And if you talk about God creating the universe as an extension of God's being, that the idea of being in hell is that you have this sense of separation in your mind. And there's kind of a spiritual path that I have benefited a lot from in the last 20 years, and that's A Course in Miracles.
Yes, love it.
In A Course in Miracles, the idea is to participate in the atonement. That's a biblical term, but it turns all the biblical terms on their heads. And atonement is healing the separation in your mind. And we all come to this physical dimension with a built-in sense of separation. And the Course talks a lot about that. It's the ego mind, the egoic mind. And what we find in the Bible is a perfect portrait of a human ego run amok.
Yeah,
totally. Even if you just start with the 10 Commandments, for example, the very first one or two, depending on how you count them, God demands absolute fidelity and unconditional love from his followers. And then he will punish it to the 10th or 7th generation, how many generations it is.
Yeah.
Now that's what we demand of our romantic partners and the people in our lives, is absolute faithfulness. Otherwise, we are very jealous and we will punish it. And I think based on this picture of God in the Bible, if you can get through all of that, it helps remove the fear created by the biblical authors, and then the fear created by all the preachers in the pulpits every Sunday about this God, which I treat now, after I've taught the Bible for several years and I'm working on this book, I treat God of the Bible as a literary character, a character in a book. And I don't see this God as anything related to a real divine source. And the further I go into it, I have to admit, I'm much more agnostic as I go. And
me too.
I don't really know anything about source. I can say, like you say, it feels loving. And I have many examples of unbelievable love in my life and things that have come along. But like you said, Jerry, I believe I am the creator of my reality. And if anything, if it means anything that we're created in the image of God, it means that we have the ability to be creators on our own of our realities. So yes, we can create hell or we can create heaven in the present, in the here and now. And that's how I see things now. I don't really waste or spend too much time wondering what God is and all of that. And I know a lot of people still like to say, God told me this and God told me that. And those kind of things make me very suspicious at this point in my development.
Yeah, I mean, the Bible, if applied literally, I mean, could be a case of what not to do. I mean, it's, people go, oh, well, it's in the Bible. And I actually just did a 10-page report on the contradictions in theology as well as the Bible.
Only 10 pages?
Only 10 pages. It's growing. It's growing. It literally says it's a work in progress. And I keep going in and adding, come on, message me and message me of your own.
Could I speak to that though?
Of course.
What's in the Bible?
Yes.
Before I started teaching the Bible, I didn't realize that the basic picture in the Bible is that no one goes to heaven when they die.
Yeah.
Right.
And everyone goes to Sheol
Mhm.
or
Waiting
Hades.
room.
Everyone. There's no popping up. Now, modern evangelicals like to say that you go to heaven immediately. No one in the Bible believed that. It's not written in the Bible. It's not there in the Bible. The most that they might have believed is that you are extinguished. But the belief in Sheol we have in the Hebrew scriptures, you just go there and everyone forgets about you and God forgets about you. That was David's big fear in the Psalms. Why should I go to Sheol where I'll be forgotten? And we see in the New Testament kind of a twist to the whole thing added by Paul, let's say, mostly Paul, that when you die, you go down there. But if you're a believer and one of a follower of Jesus, you could get sprung out of there at the sound of the trumpet. And that was a new twist, that you could actually get sprung out of there.
In one of his 7 heavens, right?
Yeah. People like to point to the fact that in Luke, there's this story about a man, Lazarus, in anguish,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a depiction of hell. That's not a depiction of hell either. That's kind of like the Greek Hades. And there is a special place in Hades called Tartarus for the really bad ones. And notice in the story that they can both see each other. So the one who's in the bosom of Abraham, so to speak, he can actually look and see the other one. And so it's not a depiction of the classic hell as we've been taught when we were kids, and all the fire and the torture and all that stuff. It's not in the Bible. And even the lake of fire in the New Testament, it's
So
a place
Egyptian.
where you are just extinguished. You're annihilated. And that's the end of you. And that was considered the worst punishment. Just that would be the end of you.
Well,
And isn't that sorry.
When Jesus speaks of Gehenna, it was actually a dump.
Yep.
So when he was talking about, don't end up in Gehenna, it was don't be that person to where no one mourns your loss. They just dump your body in it burns. There was so much shit, it burned constantly.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And people who didn't have family, people that didn't have loved ones, people who were hated, the pariahs, they were thrown there.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody using that as a way to, again, control the masses should be check yourself. Don't be an idiot or an asshole and end up in, where no one loves you. Because that's what
those references come from Matthew, and the deeper I go into Matthew, I don't trust anything about Matthew.
Yeah.
Matthew is completely midrash. And he takes a million things from the Hebrew scriptures, refashions them, and says they're all about Jesus when they weren't. And he says they're prophecies when they weren't.
Yeah.
And you can do a very detailed study of Matthew. And that description of Jesus saying he's going to separate the sheep from the goats, that actually comes from Ezekiel chapter 37. It's a description of God on the day of the Lord, when God comes down and separates the sheep from the goats and restores Jerusalem to its original glory. And Matthew just took that passage right out of Ezekiel and made it to be something Jesus said. So I don't really trust much of what I read in Matthew in any case.
Well, and supposedly I put this in the piece that I wrote. By the way, if you want to read the piece, go to my website and sign up. It's right there. But zombies dancing in the streets after the resurrection doesn't say exactly. Nowhere else in the Bible does it say that. I mean, Matthew just goes off and the whole goats and sheep.
That's the dry bones coming back to life.
Well, and when I was doing my thesis about reincarnation, I talked about Paul and about how I found an analogy that it's the Michael Jackson Thriller song, and a bunch of properly dressed bodies are just going to come out and start dancing at the day of judgment.
Well,
In some cultures, that is the sign of respect. They dig up their relatives and they dress them up and they are with them. And that, I think, for me, the Bible seems to be stories. Here's the heretic stories. Hey, look at this. You take out of it what you will. Wherever you are in your place is what you get out of it. We are writing our own stories for some big, huge Bible, and somebody's going to look at our journey and think, "Ooh, this is what they were saying. This is what they were saying." When in fact, I was stumbling my way through. In this part, I was in hell. This part was going really, really, really good. These are a bunch of bad choices. Granted, I didn't rape 400 girls or anything like that. But everything that they talk about as you were saying, as a means of controlling the masses, was isolation and exclusion. You will not be, period. And that kind of goes to what you were saying, David, about the ego. You will not be, period. And that's an inherent need for us to be with.
Yeah, that's right.
David Greenway seems to be having a little bit of trouble. Dave, do you have any input right now? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, one of the things I'd like to mention, people have been going on about connection to the source or connection to God. Well, one of the things that God intended that we would all have separation from source, so we could actually attain our each individual aspect of creation and personality. Did you hear all
So
that?
you think separation from source is intentional?
Indeed, I think it gives us our identity.
I can see that being as part of the ego, but I'm not real sure.
So kind of like is he talking about when we kind of discover and define ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, ego can, the way that I look at it is ego and love are the opposite, right? Because love is giving, ego's taking, love is uniting, ego's separation. Is that what you mean, David Greenaway?
Yes, sort of. Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Basically, I keep losing signal from your end. My Wi-Fi is 100%, and I keep losing signal from your end.
The UK is far away. Those talking cans are having trouble.
Basically, the separation and creation of the self is quite an important thing in God's work, I believe. And basically, the individual creation of each person is a very important work.
Tech gods are putting us in hell tonight.
He just got separated.
I have a question for you, David.
Oh, yes.
Was there, at what point did you start deconstructing? Was it an aha moment, or what brought you?
Briefly stated, I went to Bible college, and immediately after Bible college became a minister of music in a large metropolitan church in Philadelphia. And then that showed me enough that I didn't really want to be a minister of music. I would rather have been in the academic world. I'm more suited to academia. So I left the position of minister of music and went to grad school at Temple in Philadelphia. And at that point, the thought occurred to me that maybe I only believe everything I believe because I was taught that as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't really tackled those questions for myself. And I was in a position at that point, not being a professional Christian, finally. And I didn't have to toe a party line to keep my job. There was no risk. And I was pursuing an academic career not in the church at that time. So I felt really free to question every single thing that I'd ever believed. And the first thing I started with was, does God exist? And I wrestled with that for a few years and tried on atheism for a while. And that didn't suit me so well because as a musician, we sort of get in contact with transcendental experiences, that there's some kind of transcendent thing beyond us. So atheism doesn't really work too well for me. But then the revelation or the experience about hell not being real, that was the first big thing in that process while I was doing my master's degree at Temple. And then it took many more years after that.
And doesn't it feel, well, for me, once that concept of hell as a place was gone, it felt freer. It felt freer to love without worrying if you were doing it the right way or am I making mistakes here? There was no boom. That's it. You're done. You're back in jail until who knows what. I felt like it allowed me to grow a lot more, understanding that my mistakes didn't define a place where I would end up. It was a process.
Yeah.
Well, when you're no longer living in fear, though, right? Because there's so much fear associated with hell that, I mean, it's all encompassing. And when you're when you're constantly worried about maybe this one mistake, is going to doom me to hell. I mean, I vividly remember my mom walking up and down screaming and flailing her arms, screaming, "You're going to hell and you're taking my grandson with you." Because it differed from her beliefs.
Well, I wasn't so afraid of going to hell because I asked Jesus into my heart when I was 2 years old. I went forward at an evangelistic crusade. I was pretty sure I wasn't one of the ones going there. And, in a recent poll, very recent this year, only 2% of Americans believe that they're actually going to hell. That I find that interesting, that there are people out there who actually believe they're going there. But I wasn't one of those, and I still am not one of those. So it wasn't really something fearful to me. But what a lot of people who are deconstructing today are finding is that when they drop their belief in hell, they no longer see a need for the Christian Savior to save them from it.
True.
Because that's part and parcel of the evangelical message, that you need a Savior to save you from hell. Of course, they don't go the next step is to save you from what? Well, the wrath of God. You're actually saving you from God so that you can spend eternity with God.
It's such a click.
But anyway, go ahead.
And I wonder if it allows you to turn your back and ignore those people that have been caught up by Satan.
Totally.
Now I don't have to worry about relating to them anymore or seeing them as a person because Satan's got them. I got nothing to do with them. Further isolating and excluding, which totally went against everything that we're supposed to understand about God and love, is that we are meant to be together. So as long as we can take away the responsibility that each person should have for their actions and blame it on this big red dude with horns on his head and a pitchfork, then we don't have to wrestle with the why of what somebody does, with the why of what we do, with the why of what anybody else does. It gave me a whole different perspective to look at people that I would normally call evil and just see them as, you had a really fucked up life at some point and you didn't get out of it.
Yeah.
Either I don't want to get into it, or how can I help you get out of this?
Well, the big change in my mentality, and maybe Sherry, you grew up like this too, but we saw the world as the saved and the unsaved, the believers and unbelievers. And when I met someone for the first time, I would always put them in a category, and I would listen to the language they use, and I would say, yeah, you're a believer. You're one of us. And when I dropped the belief in hell, I was relieved of a huge burden of judgment. And I started to see everybody as just like me, not in a category.
No more separation.
No separation. And we're all on our own search for truth. And we can help each other out if we can. And I stopped putting people in these horrible categories that you're one of us. It's very tribal, you're part of my tribe. And
my mom disowned everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just me. It was family, friends, and, we're all going to hell. And if she associates with us, then we were dragging her to hell also. Guilt by association. And it was always divisive. It was always like, how could a mother do this to her own daughter in the name of a loving God? It never made sense to me, but I still feared hell. It was still of this place to go to, and what if. I no longer believe any of that. I think we're all responsible for our actions. I do learning about the Egyptian religion and the scales of truth. They believe that when you die, you put your heart on one of the scales and a feather on the other. And if your heart is light as a feather, meaning you nothing dragging you down, no sins per se, no murders or anything like that, cruelty to your people. But if your heart is lighter than a feather, then you go to their heaven. If it's not, then you go to their hell. And that really, even if it was just a scales analogy, that gave me a way to say I'm not done yet. If I screwed up in the past, if I did these things out of ignorance, if I did them out of whatever, I still have time to make it up. I still have times to offset those scales to say, okay, let me try and do better because I was young and dumb before. David Green, talk to me, friend.
Go ahead.
I've come to my phone now, so I won't be interrupted again.
That's so much better.
It is.
What's that?
Yeah, I was going to mention that there are visions of a dark place in a lot of religions. So it's not just Christianity. So the hell and heaven that Christians have been brought up with is possibly one of the more recent versions. But because of the nature of Jesus being God's son per se, it was set on a higher plane and maybe became a little bit more real. But hell, basically, when we become as real as we can be, hell becomes redundant because people realize in their hearts that is not the place they want to be. So they decide not to choose the wrong wolf.
You like that wolf? I love that. Christians and Muslims. What's that?
The wolf story puts it into perspective, and it's a very old story.
Yeah. Only Christianity and Islam believes that hell's eternal. Other religions believe in hell, like I mentioned about the Hindus and stuff like that, but only the Christians and the Islam, unless it's some, as far as the main religions, because someone's going to say, well, something out there isn't. But for the majority of religions, only Christianity and Islam believe it's eternal hell. No getting out, no forgiving yourself, no. Someone asked us to talk about purgatory. As an evangelical, I know nothing about purgatory.
Purgatory
Than,
was the halfway house. That was the you have a small chance if you got a lot of friends that will pray for you. And it was just it was another way of demeaning who you were, excluding you, and making you feel horrible, just absolutely horrible. That's a whole Catholic thing.
Yeah,
that was a
and
whole
it
Catholic
wasn't
thing.
really codified until
No.
the 1200s. So it took a long time for that one to get really into the councils, and then that was a big issue for Martin Luther, of course, in the Reformation. All of the indulgences,
Yes.
and in the coffers of the church. So I don't know what modern Catholicism teaches about it now. I don't think it's such a big deal anymore, but it's not my specialty.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't. I know it's a waiting room, like a halfway point, and then when you're following man's rule, and I think this is where Jesus was coming from, is that's why it was no laws. Man's law continues to flow, and I always picture when I was studying the 613 commandments, I pictured them going, okay, love, it's all you need to do. And this guy's sitting at a desk, and someone comes up and goes, but, and they go, okay, but let me write that down.
Yeah.
And you get hundreds of years of this,
Yeah.
and there's all these buts. Excuse this person, and now we have a waiting room in case you're just not okay to go to hell. You're in that middle realm. And it adds all of this cluster to it when it's just so simple. Either you love or you don't. It's love. You bring it in or you don't. It really convolutes life in general and puts a lot of restrictions on our happiness in doing so.
Could I add something to that? The love thing?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you look at the parable of the Good Samaritan, the thing that sets it up in the Gospel of Luke is the question of the lawyer, how do I get eternal life? Which is really euphemistic for how do I enter the eternal kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God, the new kingdom. And Jesus asks him for this common summary of the law and the prophets, which the lawyer answers correctly. And it was going around the ancient world at the time, was to love the Lord your God with all your heart and your neighbor as yourself, etc. Now, notice what Jesus did not say. He did not say, plus, you're going to have to wait a few weeks till I die on the cross.
Yeah.
And then have faith in me.
But wait, there's more.
Yes.
Do that, and you've entered the kingdom, which he said in other places, the kingdom is within you, right? It's inside. It's a internal recognition of unity. And then to illustrate that, of course, we know the lawyer wasn't satisfied. Who's my neighbor was the next question. To illustrate that, he uses a typical outsider, an arch outsider, a Samaritan who was considered not part of the, the Orthodox Jewish religion. And that's very telling, because Jesus is trying to say there are no insiders and no outsiders. We're all part of the kingdom, you see. So I think a lot of people like to look at Jesus as maybe a revolutionary, a social justice preacher or whatever. I tend to think of him more as an enlightened master. And enlightened masters have realized the unity of all things and the connectedness of all things. And I think that might have been what Jesus was trying to illustrate by using the parable of the Good Samaritan. But I could be wrong about that. Who knows? That's how
You sound like it. You sound like you hit it on the head. And it's always the human idea to let me define myself by putting these people down and lifting myself up, because I have absolutely no confidence that I'm a good person unless I am able to label everybody else. And you can't. I think, and I saw Michelle just said something about worrying about her daughter if they didn't get her baptized. It popped up. Yes, that. Same thing. I was so terrified when I was pregnant that something would happen. And then once my children were born, there was absolutely no way I could believe in God if I believed that God would separate us from the very being that is supposed to have unconditional love, because I know what I felt for my children. And if I felt that as a person, whoo, holy cow, that was magnified to an infinity. So the question I have is, at what point can you take yourself out of your own hell? Or is it dependent on others to help you out?
Again, I think it all falls back on us. I think that, that other people can put us into hell, by restricting their love, by ostracizing, those types of things. But I don't think that, anybody else can make us. I don't even know how to even say this, because again, I think that hell is on earth a lot of times, so I don't know that anybody else could make us go there other than feeling like we are, right?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, in a relational aspect.
Yeah. What were you going to say, DeAndre?
Yeah, I agree with you that it's our inside work, ultimately. But the other thing about A Course in Miracles, the word miracles in the title is not poof and you make wine from water. Miracles are when you share those intangible moments of love.
Yes.
And you increase the awareness of love and the connectedness of everything with another person. And that might be a brief encounter on the street, when you encounter somebody on the street, do something loving, something nice, or it could be bigger things in your life. But in that way, we can help each other become more aware of our connectedness. But if a person is not wanting to be aware of the connectedness, there's nothing you can do to help them. They'll just stay in their own private hell. So we do our best, but ultimately we can't make someone drink water if they don't want to, right?
Yeah.
I think coming out of a private hell that you've created in your own life is something to do with loving yourself, so you can have relationships with other people. And that love pertains to the relationship you have from that moment that you actually love yourself. And in order to love yourself, you have to be doing the correct thing, which comes back to the rules that were there in the first place.
That makes sense.
Yeah, just do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's,
in a manner of speaking, yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw this up because we have a contrarian in there, and I know Mike Zanker's been messing with me this entire show. You just wait, Mike. But I don't think I'm not sure who this comment's from. But the hell of a fire of God's love, I don't think that true love is painful. I mean, if
No.
I don't. Love heals. Love unifies.
It's joyful. It's joy.
Yeah.
Not pain.
I mean, and that's the problem that I have with, when we make God or Satan equal to us, there's nothing there to aspire to. There's nothing there, it's just like, don't piss off the big dude, because then you may have to deal with the other dude. And there's nothing to aspire to make you better. There's nothing to aspire to love. And when you have God as that way, which is through so much of the Bible, it's the reason why things didn't evolve more, why we didn't spiritually evolve sooner, because we've been still thinking that this supreme being is like us. And we would send someone to hell. We would judge them.
Yeah.
We would do all of those things because that's us.
That's our ego.
Exactly.
And the other thing about Jesus, when you put him on a pedestal and say he is God, you remove all of the power of his example.
Yeah.
Because if I see him now as a person like you and I, and not a demigod, nothing like that. Because if a person like you and I can have this great realization and share it with the world in such a powerful way, that gives me hope that maybe I could attain that great realization in a true way, intimate way, and also be of influence in the world. So I don't think it's helpful at all to make Jesus a demigod like that.
Yeah, me either. Greenaway, what you got to say?
I'd just like to come to the definition of hell and the fires that are involved in said place. This is all to do with the formation of the earth and the creation from the magma, which came from the seventh dimension, which is something I mentioned on my website yesterday. And the creation of the earth, the fires of creation, which is from whence we came, is also the fires of destruction. So therefore, this is why fires are mentioned in the definition of hell.
Well, a lot of our definition and our imagery comes from Dante, not the Bible.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Did I mention the Bible?
Sorry.
I can't remember.
Are you getting spunky with me, Greenaway? Between you and Zanker, what are you guys out for me tonight? I see. Bring it.
But apparently there was a manuscript written around 100 AD, and it's called The Apocalypse of Peter.
Mm.
And in The Apocalypse of Peter, the risen Christ gives Peter a tour of heaven and hell. And in hell, there's all of these punishments that fit the crime. And people who were gossipers, let's say, were hung by their tongues and things like that.
Hindus believe the same thing.
So, yeah, and Dante is an extension of that 1,200 years later. But the point about all of those things is that it does require a body to experience that kind of torture. And every description that a modern preacher uses, and there's some guy who's making a lot of waves on the internet, his name is Bill Weiss, 23 Minutes in Hell. He had an out of body experience and he went to hell. Mm. And in it, he describes being in a dungeon and his body was cold and he was thirsty. Again, it all depends on to have a physical body in this case. And for the ancient world, they didn't believe that you would have a body in that world.
Well, the Egyptians did. The Egyptians are the ones that had the attachment to the body with, the mummification and stuff like that.
I was going to say that you had to have a god breathe life into that body once it got in a certain place or something like that. Yeah. So it was hard for anyone to imagine life without a body. And even Paul, his idea of resurrection is with a body. Whereas evangelicals today think that you'll go to a land of spirits. So that's quite different than what the ancient world viewed the afterlife to be about.
Well, and there's so much attachment to the body that I find it ironic because so many people's issues have to do with their body.
Everything.
I'm too fat. I'm too skinny. All of these things. We hate our body, but yet we are going to try and claim it and hold on to it in the afterlife.
Yeah.
It's like I can hear my girlfriends going, "Don't you make me fat in the next one." When you have control over something that changes literally from the moment you were born to the day you die, to have that attachment on there. Again, I had it when I was an evangelical, growing up in that situation, in learning the other faith, in learning the other beliefs, I shed that attachment.
Yeah.
And it helps now when I gain weight.
Yeah, me too.
It's just a body. Who cares? Anna, you've been quiet. What you got to say, girl?
I am I'm thinking about the book, The 5 People You Meet on Your Way to Heaven, and how that could have been termed hell until the main character realized that he had met all these people, these small miracles, as you might say, David, these small miracles throughout his life in people. He just never realized it. He didn't recognize them until he went back through. And I wonder all the times that I personally felt like I was in hell. Was it the inability or the refusal to see the miracles, the looking through the two-way glass and not really bothering to open the door and step outside and here is what I need to see, instead of here's what I'm afraid of looking at, so this is all I'm going to focus on.
Very good point. Very good point.
I don't know where I was going with that, but that's what came out.
Okay, I can't even believe it, but we're at the top of the hour. You can join the VIP show by going to Fireside Creators VIP. The link will be in there or maybe I didn't do it. I'll post it in the VIP as soon as we end this show. So, as a round robin, for final comments, David DeAndre, you go ahead. Where can people find you? What you got to say?
Okay, I'm mostly active on Facebook, on my personal page these days. And again, I'm writing this book. I've already written the entire first draft, and I'm working through to the last chapter. I'm on the last chapter of the rewrite. So eventually that will come out as well. And mostly, as I said, I'm active on Facebook, and I really welcome anyone who wants to join the conversations. I create a lot of posts on deconstruction topics, as you know. So anyone who wants to join the conversation, you're very welcome.
They're wonderful posts and very enlightening. David Keith Greenaway, what you got to say?
Right, I've got a book coming out which has been going to the printers tomorrow. It's called AlienGD7.co.uk. The first chapters of Philosopher's Dream 114. I'm also available on AlienGD7.co.uk, which is a website that I've published, which is a collection of ideas, basically, that I'm trying to seed in the consciousness of the planet Earth. And I'm also available on Facebook. Anybody that wants me on Facebook, my name is there. And I'm also available on Twitter and Instagram, and TikTok.
Yeah, for some reason, Facebook wouldn't let me add any of your stuff today or tag you or anything. So feel free to go back into that post and add your stuff so people can get the links and put those on. I couldn't do it for some reason. Anna, what you got to say?
Nobody's going to hell. Don't believe anybody's going
in a handbasket.
In a handbasket, Gucci bag, it doesn't matter. I'm on Facebook. I have a lot of hopefully inspirational things and a few rants. That's all. Don't go to Twitter. I'm a very angry person on Twitter, so don't go to Twitter. Other than that, it was so good to listen to you, David and David. This was awesome.
Yes,
it's a pleasure being with you all. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so very much. I loved this show. And David, you're going to be on in a couple weeks, so with Greenaway. So I'm glad we got your tech worked out now.
I know to use my phone in the future.
Exactly. We got that down. Figured it out. Okay. Any more questions or anything before I sign everybody off and move into the VIP? Go. I'm looking at the comments. I don't think we missed anything, but if we did, I hope to see you in the VIP. If you're not in the VIP, go to sherrypalace.com, and you, if you sign up for as little as $3 a month, you can get into the VIP, and then we'll see you there. David, Anna, you guys rocked it. Thank you so very much for this conversation. I can't even believe we flew through in such an hour. It was that good. Yeah. I'll see you guys in the VIP.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. What a great show, right? Oh, I love these. I love the conversation. I love the interaction. Mike Zanker, I'm coming for you. And everybody else who messed with me during this show. Next week's show is on leaving religion and finding yourself. I've got Chrissy Stroop and two others that I'm not even going to try and say their names right now, but I'll be posting the images later. An ex-Amish and an ex-Hasidic Jew. So that show should be another mind blower in getting different opinions from everybody around the campfire. Thank you so very much for watching and joining and following along. You're great. Love you. Bye.